Blade Nzimande has moved from the Transport Ministry back to Higher Education. He has been sworn in as Minister of the newly emerged Higher Education, Training and Science and Technology Department. Nzimande previously served as Higher Education Minister at the height of the Fees Must Fall protests. South African Union of Students spokesperson Thabo Shingange joins us now to tell us what he thinks about Nzimande's reappointment. Thabo, good evening. Thanks very much for your time. Tell us what your organization thinks of his reappointment.
Good day, thank you for having me. The South African Union of Students takes note of the appointment of Minister Nzimande as the Minister of Higher Education and Training, Science and Technology. But of course, the Minister's appointment comes against the backdrop which you have highlighted to of the challenges and the many challenges in the higher education sector which the Minister has presided over. The challenges which have resulted in the dysfunctionality of many of our institutions as a result, or emanating rather from his own instructions in that particular regard. And so, as students across the sector, there is a tension with the appointment of the minister. There is legitimate tension, legitimate concern in that particular regard, for which he is yet to come across to capture the imagination of students in the country and to show empathy, because one of the many issues that was definitive of the then Minister of Higher Education, Blade, under DHED when it was still in its original form, was his lack of empathy towards the student issues, was his harsh nature towards addressing students' issues, which took an anti-student posture. And so many a times he found it correct to allow universities to send private security onto campus to brutalize students, to send private securities onto campus and police to arrest students in that regard. And so I think there's a lot of tension that students still hold with the minister, also with his utterances towards us. But I think as a union, we take particular interest in the merger, rather, which is now going to be presiding over that of the Department of Higher Education and Training and that of Science and Technology. I think the merger is one we need to pay critical attention towards, in the sense that, yes, on the one hand, science and technology can be used to reimagine how education is dispersed in our particular country. But at the same time, as a union, we are cautioning that it should not come rather at the expense of the humanities as a faculty, which has seen a rapid decline in terms of students' interest towards that particular discourse, and particularly because the humanities holds a very fundamental role in shaping the socio-economic relations of this country moving forward. And so it would be interesting, as a union, believe, to look at how the minister will take on this new responsibility. But our particular focus, of course, at this point in time is to resolve the tension that students have currently with the minister. And in this regard, I think as a union will be engaging with the Department of Higher Education, Science and Technology to facilitate some kind of engagement such that the minister can take us into confidence as students of this country in terms of how do we shape our programs with our inclusion of students, and SRCs rather, across the sector.
Well, lots of things, issues that you've raised there. I perhaps hear you on the issue of empathy. I mean, it is a personal thing whether somebody shows it or doesn't. But do you not believe that many of the things you're holding him responsible for are not of his own making? The funding issue, for example, is something that gets decided by government collectively and not just the Minister of Higher Education.
I think you'll be missing the discussion when you want to bring in the technicalities of this particular discussion. Because rather, if we can go back to a moment in time, a regrettable moment in time rather, with the minister's utterances. I mean, he's uttered things like students must fall. At the peak of tension, at the peak of challenges, at the peak of hopelessness for many black people and many students in this particular country, we cannot have a minister come out, whether in a jokeful form or not. The seriousness of the matter requires somebody who's going to show empathy towards students, requires a leader who will come out and take us into confidence to say that the challenges that, yes, are historic, yes, the patterns of oppression continue to play out in our particular institutions. Yes, we are fully much aware of that. And so it requires a minister to be empathetic towards the continued effects of these legacies of the past that students are subjected to on our campuses. I mean, for instance, we should not be speaking about a minister, should not speak of the minister's office as one which is merely acknowledging the state of the higher education sector, but we need an activist minister, one which will begin to transform meaningfully the higher education sector, will begin to put much emphasis and focus on the TVET sector as well as a critical component of our developing country. And so I think we are saying we want empathy towards these particular things.
Let's take the example of Naledi Pandor, right? Who it would appear was a lot more empathetic than a Blade Nzimande. But she left without addressing the big problem of higher education funding, and that was the missing middle, empathetic as she was.
I think the question of empathy, again, we should not pin it against one minister against the other. We view whoever presides over the Department of Higher Education and Training responsible for dispersing our education is one which we should focus on and not draw contrast. But of course they must build on the work that has been done by the predecessors. Even Minister Naledi, as she's outgoing, of course, she would have built on the work of her predecessors. And we're saying that we would hope that the Minister, Blade Nzimande, continues to build on the work of his predecessors and even his own work which he had left in the past. And so I don't want to dwell much on the question of empathy. I think it's an issue that the minister is not foreign to. Minister Nzimande is not foreign to. He's fully much aware of the discontent of many students in the country. And I think it's a task that he must take upon himself, as a union belief. He must take it upon himself to bring students into confidence, to take students into confidence around these matters, and that indeed his empathy towards student issues has really taken a new dawn, as has been promised to many South Africans in our country.
Thabo, thanks very much for your time. That's where we're going to leave it for this evening. Thabo Shingange, who is the spokesperson for the South African Union of Students, which is an umbrella body comprised of SRCs from universities across South Africa.